So today I wanted to share a story where I was bullied at work. Sorry, I haven't thought about it in a really long time, and yeah, it's a bit of a dark story, but it has a really good ending, and it sort of encapsulates my entire wage slave philosophy, because I was actually forced into a situation that really conflicted with my values. Okay, so here's the story. As a consultant, I worked at a lot of companies, and I've ended up in all sorts of positions, and sometimes I even end up in manager positions where I have to act on behalf of the company regarding other employees. So I was at this place where I was making forecasts for upcoming sales, and I was actually very good at that job, which is the reason I got to come back to that company a few times in my career. Now, the thing about working as a consultant is that the actual staff sometimes feel a bit intimidated with my presence, They sometimes feel like they're competing with me, which I often have to reassure them that they aren't, because I'm not interested in a career at any company. So the whole reason for working as a consultant is that I don't feel like I have to be stuck at some place for a really long time. But this one time, there were a couple of workers who essentially bullied me at work. They didn't like me for some reason, and I'm only assuming that it was because of my presence, And there was this one guy who was the worst. In this video, let's just call him Nelson. Now, Nelson had the same job as I did, but for a different market. So it felt a bit like a competition, who has the highest forecast accuracy of the month. And this, of course, is quite silly because we had different markets, so we weren't really competing, But this guy really seemed to hate my guts for some reason. He used to talk down to me and often questioned my work in a way that I really haven't experienced ever before. Like, he would do his best to sort of embarrass me at meetings. And yeah, it was often very subtle, but effective. And what's worse, it actually affected my work. I started to perform poorly. My forecast accuracy dropped. And I remember that I tried to go out of my way to be nice to Nelson, but it seemed like, the kinder I got, the weaker I seemed. I remember I used to ask him if he wanted to join me for lunch, and he wouldn't even respond. And sometimes it was even worse. He made fun of me because at the time I liked KFC, okay? And most people at that workplace, they were like health freaks. And he went out of his way to really tease me about KFC. So none of my coworkers dared to join me for lunch because of that. Nelson. He was so rude to me, and sometimes even yelled at me. Now, I wish I could say that it didn't bother me, that I'm a mental giant, I'm not afraid of anything, but I'm just as human as the next wage slave. Being bullied at work, it can really hurt. If you've experienced it yourself, you know what I'm talking about. Now, I would often experience anxiety, and that itself reduced my working capabilities. I had trouble keeping up at meetings. I had trouble being able to speak, and so most meetings I was just sit there quietly, and I had difficulty sleeping, and at no point did Nelson ease up on me. I mean, if I showed the slightest moment of uncertainty, he would use this and try to embarrass me in front of our manager. Now, at the time, I sort of felt like I couldn't go to the manager and complain because the bullying started to... Because the bullying got to the point where I actually started to believe that I was incompetent. And also the manager and Nelson, they seemed to be friends, so I didn't feel confident that the manager would actually believe me. And I wanted to verbally defend myself, but whenever I saw Nelson, I would just freeze, I felt alone and I really couldn't figure out what to do. I was in a really dark place at that time. And then something unexpected happened. The manager got burned out and quit. And this was quite surprising. Nobody really saw it coming, despite the fact that this company was quite stressful. And a new manager was hired, and this new manager was extremely results-driven. And his bar was very high, especially when it comes to how hard workers worked. And this put a lot of pressure on all of us. And it actually got Nelson off my back. He had to focus on his own work instead of bullying me. And for me, it actually felt like a new start. I got my confidence back, and because the bullying stopped, I was able to actually do my job, and my forecast accuracy shot up. Also, I wanted to impress the new manager, so I performed above and beyond. There was no quiet quitting going on here. I remember I made these incredible PowerPoint presentations, and they really impressed him. And you know how first impressions are important? Well, I sort of became his right hand, and I was asked to attend at manager meetings, and he often asked me for advice. And I remember at staff meetings, the manager would say things like, "Wow, Tom, that's really impressive. There's really nothing you can't do. I should send you to the key accounting department so you can shape things up over there." And for the first time ever, Nelson didn't say anything. This time he actually froze. And this one lunch break, the manager asked me where I'm going to lunch, and I said, well, I like KFC. And in front of everyone, the manager asked if he could join me. Now, I need you to understand that at this point in the story, I wasn't interested in getting back at Nelson. I only had something like 2 months left of my assignment, and then I would move on to the next one. So when this new manager started, all I could think about was getting the hell out of there, because I had been bullied for the past 6 months. So these last 2 months, Nelson didn't bully me. My forecast accuracy was higher than his, and he was busy basically struggling to survive. And he started to make mistakes. And then something happened. The manager called me for a meeting, and he said, "Hey, Tom, Nelson is not performing very well. Just between you and me, do you think he should be working here?" And so I was put in this position where I could get revenge. I could sink Nelson with a simple no. I could get him fired. And it sort of felt like my life was testing my character here, Like, what would you do in a situation like this? All those months of bullying, Nelson deserved to go down. And so, he asked me again, "Tom, what do you think of Nelson?" And I thought about it for a couple of seconds, and then I said, "Look, Nelson has a very difficult market. I've had his market before. I don't think I would have handled it much better. And I think that if you give Nelson some time, you will see just how good he really is." Now, you might think that a bully like that doesn't deserve mercy. And trust me, there was a side of me that would have loved to get my revenge on him. And also, who knows if Nelson would bully other people in the future. It's just that, morally it didn't feel right. It sort of reminded me of that movie, Scent of a Woman, with Al Pacino, where one character gets a chance to go to Harvard by ratting on one of his classmates. But instead, he risked his academic career because he said, there are just some things that you just don't do. It's a question of character. And that's sort of how I felt about this whole Nelson situation. Now, on my last day at work, I had this one-on-one meeting with Nelson because I had to hand over some assignments to him. And for the first time ever, he was actually nice to me. He even started to talk about personal things, which was a first too. you know. He didn't know about this conversation I had with the manager, and there was a part of me that really wanted to tell him, but I didn't. And a few months after I left that place, I heard that Nelson quit and found some other place. And so, what is the moral of this story? Well, like I said, this was an extremely difficult period of my life. Being bullied is like a nightmare. But ultimately, looking back, I feel like I did the right thing. You know, I've made my fair share of moral mistakes in life, but one thing I never do is step on others to get up in life. And also, because I hate wage slave corporations, I'm not gonna help them by firing people, you know? If I truly cared about the company, maybe I would have wanted to protect them from someone like Nelson. But I suppose in a way, I felt that the climate of result-driven companies sort of encouraged Nelson's behavior, you know? Because, you know, at the end of the day, like, the company cares more about the results than people. Like, had I gone to HR with this stuff, chances are they would have fired me, you know? You can't trust HR. I want to make a video about this someday, but you can't do it. You can't trust the managers because they will always act in the favor of profit. So, yeah. As always, thank you for listening. Do me a favor and tap that like button to show your support. Subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. Until next time, stay hungry, relentless, and strong in your journey of escaping wage slavery.